what's happening, what's going on. Part of my presence YouTube channel. I want to take this time to discuss Kanye West and all the things that are going on in the media right now. If you have not been hiding under a rock, then you probably realize that Kanye West is going through a bad time business-wise, and maybe even his personal life. We don't know, right? But as far as business, he's probably having the worst week ever, and that's because a lot of corporations, companies, entities, athletes, friends, family, whatever the case may be, a lot of people have now come out publicly to either denounce their association with Kanye West, to cut ties with Kanye West, or to end any public confusion about where they lie as far as business with Kanye West, and to let the public know that they're no longer tied to him in any form or fashion. So Kanye West, who frequently called himself a billionaire, can no longer use that title, and that's because he's only worth $400 million as of today's date. And the reason for that is because many corporations and companies that he was doing business with, they decided to cut ties due to the remarks that he made, which they considered to be anti-Semitic. So if you look at all the names of the companies that were in bed with Kanye West, as far as from a business sense, it's a pretty interesting group of companies. We're looking at The Gap, we're looking at Balenciaga, we're looking at the Hollywood talent agency, I believe it's CAA, who dropped Kanye West as far as him being one of their clients. You have MRC Studio Executives, which had a completed documentary about Kanye West. They decided to scrap it. United Talent Agency decided to condemn Kanye West's behavior as well too. And then you have two companies that I do want to get into in more depth. We're talking about Def Jam Recording Records decided to part ways and drop Kanye West as far as an artist on their label. And then you also have Adidas, the shoe company and apparel brand, deciding to part ways with Kanye West. So let's talk about the Adidas deal for a second, because that's pretty interesting, because back in September, or maybe it was late August, Kanye West went on a public rant, where he was pretty much airing out his grievances with the contracts and how they were written up. And he pretty much took The Gap and also Adidas to task. Now, The Gap decided to bow out gracefully and cut all ties with Kanye West early, but Adidas decided to hold on for dear life, and they thought that they would be able to weather the storm. Because what was going on apparently is that Kanye West was upset with how the contract was written up, and the fact that Adidas had all of the leverage written into the contract as far as having control over the Yeezy brand, having control over the fact that if Kanye West were to leave or Kanye West was to branch off, he wouldn't be able to use the Yeezy brand or the Yeezy name. He wasn't able to have full control where he could pass the Yeezy brand off to his children so that they could have complete control over the brand. So it's almost like he was in this type of contract that gave Adidas all of the leverage. And Kanye West, I guess at the time when he signed it, he wasn't aware of it, but now he's aware of it, and now he's trying to do everything he can to get out. And if you know anything about the music business, it's kind of hard to get out of a contract once it's signed, right? And many of the ways to get out of the contract is if the company decides to cut ties with you, or if you simply fulfill your contract, right? So the funny thing about all of this is that when Kanye West made the remarks that he made, and it was deemed to be anti-Semitic, Kanye West made a statement on the Drink Champs where he was, I guess people could call it a brag, or him boasting that he could make anti-Semitic remarks and not even Adidas could drop him. Now, many people took that as him taunting Adidas, but really what he was saying was that because the contract is so greatly and so lopsided in Adidas's favor, it wouldn't make any sense for Adidas to even drop him, because then that's just going to hurt their bottom line more than anybody else's. And Adidas is so much about the money and their bottom line that they're willing to forgo so many things that they will hold on to that contract and keep their affiliation with Kanye West no matter what he said. And that was really the point that he was trying to drive home. So I'm guessing based on the public outcry and the pressure put upon Adidas by the media that they had no other choice but to cancel all contracts with Kanye West. But they did it reluctantly in hopes that Kanye West would recant all his statements and go on an apology tour, similar to how Nick Cannon went on his apology tour. But that didn't happen. Instead, Kanye West decided to double down, even clarify his statements to the point where he came off as so sincere in what he was saying and also so sane in what he was saying. And at that point, Adidas really had no other leg to stand on. And from an optics point of view, look at it this way. Adidas is a German-based company. And if you look at the history of Germany, Jewish people, internment camps, and the Holocaust, it would have been a bad look if the only company that stood behind a person who made comments that were deemed to be anti-Semitic was a German company. That wouldn't have been a good look. So it's pretty obvious to see why Adidas had to cut all ties. And it's also obvious to see why they did it at the very last minute. Now, I do want to go over the situation with the Def Jam Recordings record label and how they dropped Kanye West, because to my knowledge, I thought that Kanye West was on a lifetime contract where he couldn't retire. He would have to continue making music for Def Jam until he dies. So it was pretty unclear as to why they even had to drop him, but apparently they did. But I want to go over the statement that Def Jam made as a record label as to why they dropped Kanye West. So Universal Music Group, which is a conglomerate that owns Def Jam Records, they put out the following statement. It says, Def Jam's relationship with Ye as a recording artist, Def Jam's partnership with a good music label venture, and Ye's merchandise agreement with Bravado all ended in 2021. They continue to say that there's no place for anti-Semitism in our society. We are deeply committed to combating anti-Semitism and every other form of prejudice. Now, here's an interesting thing about Def Jam, because if you look at the list of their artists, you'll notice a couple of things here, a reoccurring theme. So you have artists like Young Jeezy, Rick Ross, Dave East, the boy Dame, 2 Chainz. So if you look at all of their music that they put out, a lot of it, the central theme is selling drugs, using drugs, gang affiliation and the gang activities, murder, disrespecting women. That is the central theme of all of those artists that I just mentioned. They're all on Def Jam. So when you hear Def Jam say that there's no place for anti-Semitism in our society and that they're against all types of forms or other forms of prejudice, then you have to ask yourself, how is it that they say that on one end, dropping Kanye West, who never talked about killing anybody, never talked about selling drugs, never talked about disrespecting women. He was on a religious tip recently with Donda and Jesus is the Lord and everything else. He was on a religious tip, right? So how does it go from banning that and dropping that caliber of artist, but keeping all of these other caliber of artists of lowbrow content that is creating the destruction, the dysfunction, and the degradation of women within our communities? Tell me how that makes any sense, that these guys, Def Jam Recording Records or Universal Music Group, they're taking a stand against remarks that they deem to be anti-Semitic, but they can't take a stand towards content that is a destruction, that is doing a disservice to the Black community, that we all see that it's happening. Why isn't it that they can't be consistent in how they decide to censor, how they decide to ban, and how they decide to block certain things? Explain that to me. And that's really at the heart of all of this in regards to Kanye West. And that's really the point that Kanye West was making on numerous platforms, is the fact that they allow certain messages to be promoted to impressionable children, but then they block other messages to those same people about other groups. That is not fair, that is not appropriate, and that is very hypocritical. So the next point I want to make has to do with a particular basketball player by the name of Jaylen Brown. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he is a Boston Celtics guard. He was in the NBA Finals last year when they played against Golden State Warriors, and he was an important piece of that game, and he played very well in the championship finals. Now, apparently he had an interview with the Boston Globe, and they asked him about his affiliation with Kanye West through Kanye West's organization called Donda Sports. And Jaylen Brown had this to say. Now, I want to be clear, Jaylen Brown is not represented by Donda Sports when it comes to his NBA career. This is something that he does outside of the NBA. I'm assuming it's regarding community activism and community work. And what Brown said, and this is a quote from the Boston Globe, he said that a lot of time goes into creating an entity or an organization. The reason why I signed with Donda Sports, it represented education, it represented activism, disruption, it represented single-parent households, and a lot more people are involved in something like that. A lot of people that I work with their families, build love and respect for, spending time in the summer. A lot of people are involved. That's what the organization, from my vantage point, from Donda Sports represented. He also goes on to make a response in regards to all of the things that Kanye West has been saying and has been accused of saying within the news. He says, first, I don't condone any hurt, harm, or danger toward any group of people or individuals whatsoever. I've been a member of my community, trying to uplift my community, and I'm going to continue to do that. So what I get from that is Brown being respectful, Brown making it clear that he's all about community upliftment and his focus is on helping his community, and he's not going to buy into any of the things that Kanye West is accused of. He doesn't condone any of those things, and he's pretty much standing apart on his own 2 feet, and he's representing what Donda Sports represents, which is all about community activism and helping out the community in any way, shape, or form possible. But that was one day. In 24 hours, things changed drastically, because a story came out the next day, and this is a quote from Jaylen Brown, where he says, in the past 24 hours, I've been able to reflect and better understand how my previous statements lack clarity in expressing my stance against recent insensitive public remarks and actions. For that, I apologize. And in this, I seek to be as clear as possible. I have always and will always continue to stand strongly against any anti-Semitism, hate speech, misrepresentation, and oppressive rhetoric of any kind. In light of that, after sharing in conversations, what type of conversations did you have? How did they press you, Jaylen? Because that's what I'm getting from this. Anyways, in light of that, after sharing in conversations, I now recognize that there are times when my voice and my position can't coexist in spaces that don't correspond with my stance or my values. And for that reason, I am terminating my association with Donda Sports. So I don't know about you, but I thought his initial statement was pretty clear when he said that he didn't condone any hurt, harm, or danger toward any group of people or individuals whatsoever. So for him to come back 24 hours later and kind of backtrack and state specifically that he has always and will always continue to stand strongly against anti-Semitism, hate speech, misrepresentation, and any oppressive rhetoric of any kind is kind of odd, because his initial statement covers all of those things. But here's the thing, he also says, in light of that, after sharing in conversations, I now recognize that there are times when my voice and my position cannot coexist in spaces that don't correspond with my stance or my values. What conversations is he referring to, and who was he having those conversations with? And here's the thing, Jaylen Brown is an athlete, he's in his 20s. I highly doubt that he wrote this, that this was done by a PR company that wrote this on his behalf. So it's kind of odd that they would use that particular phrase, because what conversations is he referring to, and who was having those conversations with? But here's the thing that I really want to drive home, and this goes back to my entire point of this when we look at the Kanye West statements and how the media has categorized his statements, and also how corporations are now falling back and distancing themselves from him and canceling all business ties with him. And I want to really drive this home, so listen to what I have to say here. In the midst of all the controversy, Kanye West said that we don't own our voice, that there is no black voice, especially in the spaces of entertainment, sports, and music, even though those are the spaces that black people are overrepresented. But behind the veil, it's clear that we are under control, right? We're told what to think, we're told how to react. We aren't considered black if we don't vote for Democrats. We aren't black if we don't associate with poverty and struggle. We aren't black if we're not considered cool or can't dance or speak intelligently. Who told us those things? Who told us that? How did we get to that point? And every time we're discussed, it's always discussed as if we are a uniform group. We always have to think the same. We always have to vote the same. There's phrases coined like the black vote. There's phrases coined like black on black crime. There's so many different things where it's imposed upon us that we are all one group that think alike, that we're lemons, we all follow the same directions, that we could be spoken to in the same way. But how is that the case? Because we don't see that for other groups of people. There's no such thing as the white voice. There's no such thing as white on white crime, as how they categorize black on black crime. So there's so many different things when it comes to the approach of how they view black people and how they look at black people. How about the media now? And how we're categorized as just one all-encompassing group, when there's so many different fractions and so many different cultures and languages within the larger category of what is considered to be black, that I don't think people ever considered and really look at. If you're Jamaican, if you're from Trinidad, if you're from Nigeria or Ghana, or if you're from Cape Verde, or if you're from the US, you're an FBA or Adidas, there's so many different cultures and values that we have, and we're not all the same, and we don't all think the same. And then if you add on top of that our upbringing, which is the individual thing, our family cores and values and religious aspects as well there too, it should be known that you can't speak to us all the same. That we're not going to look at someone like Kanye West and see him as a person that speaks for all of us. That we're not going to look to a basketball player or entertainer and think that these guys are our leaders. That should not be the case. But for whatever reason, when it comes time to vote, they throw to us people like Cardi B, like Meg Thee Stallion, like athletes. Like, these are the people that we're supposed to resonate to and we're supposed to listen to, and we've been conditioned to actually do that. And then when I look at hip-hop music or rap music as it is today, if I want to say with confidence, when I look at what's being played on the radio, what's being promoted through social media and other platforms when it's marketed to children and even adults, the message is a message of violence, misogyny. It glorifies criminality, dysfunction, and even the use of derogatory words. And all of that has a negative effect on all of us. And we look at who's behind this music, the record companies who are signing these artists, who are promoting this type of messaging, who are encouraging artists to put out specific content in their music. It has to go back to the people who are in control, who are making these decisions. Because when you look at the rooms and the conference meetings and the executives that are there, they don't look like the same complexion as these rappers. They don't. They're not of the same faith as these rappers as well too. And this is what Kanye West was saying in those meetings. The people who have control, who are making these decisions, who have the power to censor and control the messaging within this music, because we've already seen it with Michael Jackson, one of the most famous top-selling musicians of all time. If he didn't have the power to put out specific music and specific lyrics, because he was censored, and we know what word that was. So my question to you is, if there is power to censor and control the messaging within music, why isn't that same power and discretion used to control the message and the content within the music of hip-hop, rap music? Why isn't the same discretion used? Because if you look back to what the statement was made for Jaylen Brown, where it says, I can't continue to have my voice and my position coexist in spaces that don't correspond with my stance and my values or my values. Isn't that the same thing? If you're of a particular Jewish faith, is misogyny, preaching violence and hatred, using derogatory words, is that part of your stance or your values? Can that type of music and that type of messaging and content, can you coexist in those spaces? And I think that is the question that needs to be posed to people. And people really need to figure out what the answer to that question is. And unfortunately, Kanye West not being able to articulate that particular message, not being able to speak intelligently and say things with such a concise manner where it cannot be misrepresented, that is what should have been done. And unfortunately, these things are going to happen because we look to entertainers, musicians, athletes as thought leaders. And that should never be the case. So again, the real question is, that rap music, that content, those lyrics, the imagery, the violence, misogyny, the dysfunction, the use of derogatory words and name calling, does that correspond with your stance or your values? And if they don't, where is the censorship? Where is your voice and your power to stop these things and to curtail these things? Because you know how to use them when it comes to people like Kanye who make statements. You shut them down. You cut all business ties. You separate them from their money. You know how to do those things. But why isn't that same discretion used for other groups of people that are clearly affected in a negative way by the music and the content that's put out hour after hour, minute after minute, second after every second that we see that our kids are bombarded by? Why isn't it used when it comes to rap music and the content that's been put out? Because the messaging is clearly different from what it was 10 or 20, 30 years ago than what it is today. And part of that has to do with the fact that they are allowing this type of music to be promoted and they're making money off this music. And they really don't care what the end result is, what the outcomes of it is. None of that even matters as long as it's selling and people are making money from it. But apparently not all money is good money, as Adidas knows, as The Gap knows, as Balenciaga knows, as CAA knows, as MRC Studio knows, as United Talent Agency knows, as Jaylen Brown knows, as Aaron Donald knows, as LeBron James knows, as JP Morgan Chase knows. They all know. They all know to cut ties with Kanye West in regards to his statements which were deemed to be anti-Semitic. But when it comes to statements and the content of music and the messaging in rap music that is dysfunctional, that glorifies criminality, that is degrading towards women, that promotes violence and drug use and drug selling, why don't they know as well too? Oh, and don't forget, even Def Jam took a stance against Kanye West. So they know. So all of these corporations and companies know. But yet when it comes to other issues that affect other groups, they don't know. They can't see it. They focus on the bottom line. Because when Kanye West said slavery was a choice, when Kanye West said Black Lives Matter was a scam, when Kanye West said George Floyd died of an overdose, none of those brands or those companies distanced themselves then. It was only because of the statements that he made that were deemed to be anti-Semitic. That is when they cut their ties. So that's the point I want to make in regards to this video and this message. You let me know how you feel, whether you agree, whether you disagree. Put it in the comment section. Like, comment, subscribe, and share, of course. Part of my presence YouTube channel. Next move, best move. Peace.